October 13th, 2025, high in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California. The morning began the way it always does in autumn. Cold, still, quiet. The kind of quiet that almost feels sacred. The forest was wrapped in a thin blanket of mist, drifting slowly through the towering pine trees. The smell of wet earth and pine needles filled the air. Somewhere in the distance, a raven called out, its voice echoing through the valleys. For most people, the Sierra National Forest is a place of beauty. But for those who know it well, it's also a place of immense power. The mountains here are ancient, unpredictable, and sometimes unforgiving. On that morning, 65-year-old Ron Daly drove deeper into the forest in his pickup truck. For Ron, this place wasn't unfamiliar. He had spent years hunting in these mountains. He understood the terrain, the wildlife, and the rhythm of the wilderness. This trip was supposed to be simple, a one-day deer hunting trip. He packed light, just a few supplies, a handful of snacks, several bottles of water, and the basic gear any experienced hunter would carry. Nothing about the morning suggested danger. The sky was clear. The weather forecast seemed calm. Everything looked perfectly normal. But in the Sierra Nevada, normal can change very quickly, and before the day was over, Ron Daly would find himself facing one of the most terrifying survival situations imaginable. As Ron drove deeper into the mountains, the paved roads slowly disappeared behind him. Soon, he was traveling on narrow dirt roads, carved into the hillsides. These roads are rarely maintained. Some of them exist only because hunters and hikers have used them for decades. The deeper Ron went, the rougher the road became. Sharp rocks, deep ruts, loose gravel. Still, Ron kept driving. Eventually, he came to a fork in the road. One path looked familiar. The other seemed to climb higher into the mountains. Ron chose the second path. At the time, the decision seemed harmless. Just another trail, just another shortcut, deeper into hunting territory. But that decision would soon change everything. The road twisted through thick forest and climbed steeply into higher elevations. Eventually, the terrain became extremely rough. Then suddenly, Ron's truck slammed hard against the ground. The vehicle had hit rocks hidden beneath the dirt road. The damage was immediate. The truck couldn't move forward, and backing up wasn't an option either. Ron stepped out of the truck and looked around. The forest stretched endlessly in every direction. No nearby cabins, no other vehicles, no people, just miles and miles of wilderness. Still, Ron believed he could figure something out. After all, he had been in tough situations before. What he didn't realize was that something far more dangerous was already on its way. The weather. Mountain storms have a reputation. They appear suddenly, and when they arrive with brutal force. Within hours, the sky above the Sierra began to darken. The temperature dropped sharply, the wind picked up, then the snow started. At first it was light, small flakes drifting slowly through the trees. But the snowfall intensified quickly. Within a short time, the storm transformed the forest. Snow covered the ground. The dirt road disappeared beneath layers of white. The trees grew heavy with ice. Visibility dropped. And Ron realized something terrifying. He wasn't just stuck anymore. He was trapped. The storm continued through the night. When morning arrived, the Sierra National Forest looked completely different. Nearly 2 feet of snow covered the entire area. The roads were gone. Trails were gone, and Ron Daly was completely isolated. Miles from civilization, alone in a frozen wilderness. Ron returned to his truck and began assessing his situation. His vehicle would become his shelter. Inside the truck, he had some protection from the wind and freezing temperatures, but shelter alone wouldn't keep him alive. The real challenge was supplies. Ron checked what he had with him. The result was alarming. His food supply was extremely small. Just a few snacks, some jerky, and not much else. For water, he had about 14 bottles. That was it. No emergency rations, no backup equipment, and most importantly, no way to contact anyone. His phone had no signal. Ron quickly realized that if he wanted to survive, he would need to stretch those supplies as long as possible. So he started rationing. One small bite of food per day, one small sip of water at a time. Everything had to last, because no one knew exactly where he was, and rescue might not come quickly. The days were difficult, but the nights were worse. Temperatures in the mountains dropped below freezing. The cold crept into the truck. Ron layered his clothing and tried to conserve body heat. Outside, the forest became silent. Completely silent. No vehicles, no hikers. Just the wind moving slowly through the trees. In that silence, time moved differently. Minutes felt like hours. Hours felt like days. Loneliness became one of the hardest parts of survival. And during those long nights, Ron began doing something that helped him keep going. He prayed. Every night. Later, Ron would describe those moments in simple words. It was just me and God out there. Faith became something powerful for him, not just belief, but a reason to keep fighting. Because when someone is completely alone in the wilderness, hope becomes the most important survival tool of all. As the days passed, Ron's food slowly disappeared. His body began weakening. Hunger drained his energy. Even small movements became exhausting. Eventually, the food was gone. For the last 6 days, Ron had nothing left to eat. No snacks, no jerky. Nothing. His body began burning its own energy reserves just to stay alive. His muscles weakened, his strength faded, but he still had one crucial resource: water. When the bottled water began running low, Ron searched nearby and eventually discovered a small natural spring hidden within the forest. That spring became his lifeline. Without it, survival would have been impossible. But water alone couldn't solve everything. Ron knew that eventually he would need to make a difficult decision: stay where he was, or try to escape the mountains. By the 3rd week, Ron understood something frightening. The rescue teams hadn't found him. The Sierra National Forest is enormous. Over 1 million acres of wilderness. Searching it is like trying to find a single person in an ocean of trees. Waiting any longer could mean death, so Ron made the most dangerous decision of his life. He would leave the truck and attempt to walk out, even though his body was weak, even though the terrain was brutal, even though he didn't know exactly how far help might be. It was a risk, but it was the only chance he had. The journey out of the forest was agonizing. Snow covered the ground. The terrain was steep and rocky. Every step required strength. Ron barely had left. Sometimes he could only walk 20 or 30 yards before collapsing to rest. His legs trembled. His body was exhausted. More than once he fell into the snow. During one fall, he even lost his phone. But he kept moving, step by step, hour by hour. The forest seemed endless, but Ron refused to stop, because stopping meant giving up, and giving up meant death. Then something incredible happened. After 20 days alone in the wilderness, Ron finally reached a trail. And on that trail, he saw people, a group of hunters. At first, they couldn't believe what they were seeing. A thin, exhausted man stumbling out of the forest, weak, dirty, barely able to walk, but alive. They rushed to help him immediately. They gave him food, water, and contacted authorities. Within hours, rescue teams arrived. A helicopter lifted Ron Daly out of the mountains, after nearly 3 weeks alone in the frozen wilderness. He had survived. Doctors later confirmed Ron was severely dehydrated and extremely weak. But considering everything he endured, his survival was extraordinary. Many rescuers called it nothing short of a miracle. And when Ron spoke about the experience, he didn't focus on the suffering. Instead, he talked about something deeper: faith, hope, and determination. Because in the end, survival in the wilderness isn't just about strength. It's about refusing to give up. And Ron Daly never did. If you want the next story, subscribe now so you don't miss the next survival story.